straight from the heart as opposed to straight from sort of a democratic vote on what it should be like. Because I'll live stream and they'll tell me what to do and I'll create it. And it's just not as powerful as if I was a hermit making it completely alone. So you're right. And I'm trying to figure out the balance here because I personally don't ever want to make a game again that's a gamble. Or at least that's as big of a gamble as what we're used to. I'm trying to figure out a way, it'll help me sleep at night, where I'm like, how can I make a game where I know, I'm pretty sure that it's going to make a good amount of money. And I can make that money quarterly every time, or monthly while I'm making it. And I'm not sure if that exists, but I crave it right now, you know?
I mean, certainly some version of that exists. Many versions of that exist, right? It's just finding the one that clicks for you that you can do.
Yeah.
Is obviously it's difficult. The history of the games industry though is you have all these long lived franchises where somebody found something that worked and then they were like, oh, this is what people want. And then they just made, dude, I don't even know how many Call of Duty games there are, but there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And there's a reason there's a lot of them because that's what was successful, right?
Yeah.
And so that exists. Obviously, as an indie, you don't need to sell Call of Duty number of units, right? And so in that respect, the problem's easier to find something that works for a bunch of people.
Sure.
But it also could be hard. So, I don't want to dish about another developer. Nothing that I'm about to say is meant to be negative in any way. These developers are friends of mine, right? But so the game Subnautica was very, very big, very successful.
Sure.
It was huge. That developer's previous games were kind of okay successful, but not really enough to run the studio long term, right? And then Subnautica, I actually don't know if they knew before they released it that it was going to be much bigger or not. I haven't talked to them about that, but obviously it blew up huge and everybody loved it and all this. And then they made another game after that was just a totally different idea, and it was very hard to get attention for it.
Really?
This was over the past couple years. Maybe it came out 2 years ago or something. So the market was already hard, but not as hard as it is today. But just imagine you have a game like Subnautica and there's all these people who they're interested. They want to know what your next thing is.
Yeah.
They care about you and they're interested. And then you release something and it's like crickets, right?
Yep.
That's happened to multiple very successful developers, right? So Supergiant Games, another developer who are friends of mine, vaguely friends. I talk to them every few years. So currently, Hades 2 is out. It's very successful. Hades 1 was very successful. Very meaning, very, very, very top of the curve of what anyone could ever expect, right? Tremendously successful games. They started out making games that were very successful for indies, right? So their first game was a game called Bastion that won a bunch of awards and people were into it. And it didn't sell Hades kind of numbers, but it was a successful game, right? And they did one or two other games, I don't know. And then they did this game called Pyre, which was a, sort of like a fantasy, fantasy in the sense of dwarves and elves or whatever, not like fantasy football, but fantasy soccer kind of game or something. I won't try to describe it. You can look it up or whatever. And the game just freaking bombed. They spent all this time making it and then it just went literally nowhere. Right. Yeah. And you might feel despondent at that and just be like, oh my God, what are we going to do as a developer? Is the market becoming unbearably difficult? Do we have a future as a developer? Yeah. I'm sure they probably had those kind of thoughts. And then their next game was Hades, right? And it just blew up completely. And so I don't know what lesson to take from that. Maybe you should have them on and they could tell you.
Yeah.
But the way I think about it is just I'm not in control of what people end up wanting to buy or tell their friends about or anything. So, I mean, on the one hand, you want to make money because that's how you can make more games. That's how you can, pay people to help you make games and all that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you're just not in control of that. Ultimately, you can make decisions that try to maximize that, but you're not totally in control. So the way that I think about it is just whenever I start a new project, I just ask myself, is this something that I respect? Like, do I respect this project enough that after it's done, even if like hardly anybody bought it, I will feel that I put a good thing into the world and that I made a good use of my time, not necessarily in the monetary sense, but in like developing as a game designer and becoming a better designer and progressing the thought of, what is the state of the industry in terms of thinking about game design or whatever. Yeah. Like you can pick your own criteria of what those are, but that's a thing that you are in control of, right? Do I feel really good about this thing that I'm working on, or am I doing it just to make money? Ideally, you do both at the same time.
Yep.
You make something that you feel really good about, and you also expect that people will enjoy it and buy it. But if you end up in that category of like, oh, I don't really care about this thing. I'm not that interested in it, but I'm doing it because it's a hot genre. For some reason still, like for 5 years going, there's been so many indie games that are like deck building, but where you do something weird with the deck, right? And like Balatro was that, right? So that's an example of a tremendously successful game. But you could end up making something like that because it's like, well, people are buying these deck builders. I don't really like it, and I'm not that motivated, but I'm trying to make money. And the thing is, that's bad in multiple ways. One, because if you didn't end up making money, then you kind of wasted your time the whole time, right? As opposed to like doing something that you respect and feel good about.
Sure.
But then also, if you don't love it at some level, you're not going to make the good version of it.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're just much less likely to succeed also. So I certainly have no problem with making money. I need to make a lot more myself these days. But because it's been so long since we released Great Anniversary, but like I said, that was not a big hit. But I think what we did with all the commentary and the new levels in there is like super interesting, and I'm glad that we spent the time to do that. So that's a good, that's a good outcome if you can't control the money lever.
Yeah, I mean, were you ever tempted to just capitalize on Braid?
Like make sequels and stuff?
Yeah, like because we were talking about